They say breaking up ends a relationship, but what if it only begins the nightmare? Tonight, 5 true stories of obsessive exes who didn't know when to stop. I thought moving to a new house would finally give me some peace. After the breakup, I needed a place where I didn't have to worry about running into my ex or being reminded of them at every turn. The house was old but charming, with creaky floors and faded wallpaper. I liked it. It felt normal. The first night was uneventful. I unpacked, set up my room, and tried to drown out the lingering anxiety from the past few months. I went to bed around 11, exhausted. At exactly 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint creak. My bedroom floorboards had a tendency to groan, so I tried to ignore it. But then I noticed the bedroom closet door. It was slightly cracked open. I was sure I had closed it before going to bed. My heart sped up, and I strained my ears, but there was silence. I closed the door again, pressing my back against it until I fell asleep. The next night, the same thing happened. Creak. Closet door cracked open. At first, I thought it was just the house settling or a draft, but by the third night, the fear was starting to gnaw at me. I set my phone's flashlight on the floor, pointed at the closet, and tried to stay awake. I wanted to catch whatever or whoever was doing it. I didn't sleep much that night. The fourth night was worse. I woke up to the creak, but this time I saw a shadow move inside the closet. My blood ran cold. I froze, too terrified to breathe, convinced I was dreaming. The shadow didn't move quickly. It lingered just behind the slightly open door, like it was watching me. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't cooperate. When the sun finally came up, the shadow was gone, but the door was open a crack again, mocking me. I called a locksmith the next day and had the closet doors reinforced. I even installed a small motion sensor light inside the closet. Nothing could explain the feeling I had that someone was there. That night, the creak came again, and the closet door slowly cracked open. I turned on the motion sensor light, hoping to catch a glimpse of an intruder, but it stayed empty. The following morning, I found something that made my stomach drop. Tucked in the corner of the closet was a jacket. Not just any jacket, my ex's. The familiar smell of their cologne hit me before I even saw it. I hadn't seen them in months, hadn't left it anywhere near the new house. How it got there, I couldn't begin to explain. My hands shook as I grabbed it and threw it outside. I called the police. They suggested it might be a stalker, someone who had access to the house, or maybe even a prank. They checked the house thoroughly but found no signs of forced entry. Everything was locked, everything accounted for. I had never felt more alone or more vulnerable. That night, I slept with my bedroom door locked, the jacket gone, and the motion sensor light flashing across the closet. Around 3 a.m., I woke up again. The creak started softly. My heart almost stopped. I turned on the light, and the door slowly began to open, inch by inch. But the closet was empty. I swear I felt a presence, a chill that crawled up my spine, like someone was standing just behind me, invisible. I never stayed in that room again. I moved my bed into the living room and eventually moved out of the house entirely, but the memory lingers. I still have nightmares where the closet door creaks at 3 a.m., and I see that jacket hanging there like it never left. I don't know if it was my ex, a stranger, or something else. All I know is that a door can hold more than clothes. Sometimes it can hold someone or something that won't let go. After my breakup, I thought I was finally free. My ex was controlling, jealous, and unpredictable. When the relationship ended, I moved across town into a small apartment complex. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a fresh start. I had the locks changed, bought new furniture, and told myself this was where I could breathe again. For the first couple of weeks, everything seemed normal. I worked long shifts, came home late, and enjoyed the quiet. But then, little things started to nag at me. At first, I thought I was just being careless. I'd notice a bag of chips open in the pantry when I was sure I hadn't touched it. My milk had a ring around the cap, like it had been opened. I brushed it off. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I was just tired from work. But then I'd come home, and my bed would feel warm. Not like it had been in the sun, but like someone had just been lying there. My pillows would be slightly out of place, or my blanket folded differently. The first time it happened, I told myself it was all in my head. But the second time, I couldn't shake the feeling. I started double-checking everything before I left. I'd take pictures of my fridge, the way my bed looked, even how I left my shoes by the door. And when I got back, something was always off. It was subtle, but it was there. One night, I came home from a late shift and noticed the smell of cigarette smoke in my apartment. I don't smoke, and no one else in the building smoked either. I stood frozen in my doorway, listening. The place was silent, but I swear I felt eyes on me. I checked every closet, under the bed, even the shower. Nothing. I told myself I was paranoid, maybe even going crazy. But then one morning, I woke up and found my phone charger missing. Not misplaced, gone. A few days later, it was back, neatly coiled on my nightstand. I didn't tell anyone at first. It sounded insane. Who would believe that someone was sneaking into my apartment just to move things around? Then one night, everything clicked. I'd come home early after plans were canceled. The second I opened my door, I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps retreating down the hall inside my apartment. I dropped everything and ran in, flipping every light on. My living room was empty. Kitchen, empty. Bedroom, empty. But my bathroom door was shut. I crept forward, my heart pounding, and yanked the door open. No one was inside, but the tiny window above the toilet was wide open. The screen popped out. Whoever it was had just slipped out as I came home. That was enough. I called the police. They searched the apartment, found nothing. I asked them to dust for prints, but they shrugged it off. No signs of forced entry, they said. They suggested maybe I was forgetting to lock my door, but I knew I was locking it. Every single time. The next day, I demanded the landlord change the locks. He seemed annoyed, but agreed. I finally felt like I had control again. For about a week, nothing happened. No missing food, no strange smells, no warm bed. I started to think maybe it was all over. Maybe whoever it was had given up. Then one night after work, I came home and found something waiting for me. On my kitchen table, neatly placed in the center, was a single Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me, sleeping in my own bed. I dropped it like it burned me. My hands were shaking, my throat dry. I backed out of the apartment and called the cops again, barely able to get the words out. This time, they took me seriously. They searched the place top to bottom. In the back of my bedroom closet, behind some boxes, they found a backpack. Inside was a toothbrush, some clothes, an empty pack of cigarettes, and a spare set of my keys. The officer looked at me and asked if anyone else could have had a copy. My stomach dropped. My ex, when we were together, they always insisted on having a spare key just in case. I'd completely forgotten about it after I moved. They must have had a copy made. The police put out a warrant, but my ex never showed up to work again, never went back to their old apartment. It was like they vanished. I moved out immediately. To this day, I can't sleep without checking every door, every window, sometimes 3 or 4 times. And every time I wake up in the middle of the night, I can't help but wonder if someone's still there, watching me. Because once you know someone has a copy of your keys, you never really feel safe again. It was close to midnight when my shift ended at the small retail store where I worked. By then, the parking lot was practically deserted, just a couple of cars scattered under dim lights that flickered every so often. I always parked toward the back, away from most people, because it was easier to leave without weaving through traffic. That night, though, I regretted it. As I walked out with my bag slung over my shoulder, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No cars driving by, no footsteps, not even the hum of crickets, just silence and the faint buzz of the streetlights. My car sat by itself in the corner, and I had that small, uneasy feeling you get when you know you're too exposed. I dug around in my bag for my keys as I walked up. That's when I froze. Through the windshield, I could clearly see someone sitting inside. At first, I thought maybe it was my reflection, or maybe I had parked next to another car that looked like mine. But no, there was my dented bumper, my parking pass hanging from the mirror, my seat covers, and in the passenger seat was my ex. They were sitting calmly, staring forward, with this faint, unsettling smile. I stopped walking immediately, clutching my bag tight to my side. My first thought was how? Because I remembered locking the car that morning. I always double-check. I even hit the button on the remote twice until I hear the horn chirp. There was no way I left it unlocked. Yet there they were. For a solid 30 seconds, I just stood there, staring, trying to process what I was seeing. They didn't move, didn't even turn their head toward me. Just that faint smile, like they'd been waiting for me all night. I finally pulled my phone from my pocket and called my friend, whispering quickly into the receiver that my ex was sitting in my car. While I waited for her to pick up, I looked down at the handle. That's when my stomach dropped even further. The driver's side door was locked. I tugged it to make sure, and it didn't budge. That made no sense. If the doors were locked, how were they inside? I backed away a few steps, my hands shaking. My friend picked up, and I immediately told her what was happening. She told me not to go near the car, to call the police instead, and to stay where people could see me. Except there was no one else around. The worst part was when I looked back at the passenger seat. The door was open, not wide open, just cracked slightly, like it had been pushed ajar without me noticing. My ex was no longer sitting inside. I spun around in a panic, scanning the parking lot, my pulse hammering in my ears. That heavy silence from before suddenly felt suffocating. I couldn't hear footsteps, couldn't see movement, but I knew they were out there somewhere. I ran back toward the store entrance, which by then was locked up. I banged on the glass door until the night manager, who was still inside counting the register, came over. I begged him to let me in and quickly explained what was happening. He unlocked the door and let me stay in the office while I called the police. When they finally showed up, they swept the lot, checked my car, and even ran a report. But they didn't find anyone. The only thing they did confirm was that all the doors to my car were still locked tight. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. No signs of forced entry. The officers said it was possible I had mistaken someone else for my ex, but I know what I saw. I know their face. That faint smile, like they'd been waiting for me. After that night, I stopped working late shifts. I also had my car's locks changed and even put a camera in the lot. But the worst part came a week later. I found a small sticky note tucked under my windshield wiper. It was blank, except for 3 words written in their handwriting. "Nice try, locked." I haven't parked alone since. I've dealt with my fair share of creepy situations, but nothing has stuck with me like this one. It started a few months after a messy breakup. My ex, who I'll call Alyssa, wasn't taking things well. I had blocked her on everything, changed my number, and even moved apartments. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. Then, the calls began. The first one came late at night from a blocked number. I answered without thinking, and all I heard was heavy breathing. I hung up, assuming it was just some random prank. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I stayed on the line longer. The breathing was slow and deliberate, like the person wanted me to know they were there. After about 30 seconds, I hung up again. By the 4th or 5th call, I was convinced it was Alyssa. She had done obsessive things before, but the persistence was starting to cross a line. I stopped answering, but the phone would keep ringing at random times throughout the day. Sometimes at 3 a.m., sometimes while I was at work, always from a blocked number. The first time they spoke, I nearly dropped the phone. After a few seconds of silence, a whisper came through. "I saw you at the store today." I froze. That morning, I had gone to the grocery store. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe Alyssa still had friends keeping tabs on me. But the calls kept coming, and each time, the whispers got more personal. "I liked your blue hoodie." "Why do you leave your lights on at night?" "Don't forget to lock your balcony door." That last one hit me hard, because I had forgotten to lock it that night. I hadn't told anyone. I started checking every corner of my apartment before going to bed, but the calls wouldn't stop. One night, the phone rang around midnight. I picked up and whispered, "What do you want?" The voice on the other end whispered back, "I'm already here." I'll never forget the way my stomach dropped. I spun around my apartment, scanning every dark corner. But that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The whisper wasn't only coming through the phone. I could hear it faintly. The same exact words, coming from inside my living room. I dropped the phone and bolted for the door. I didn't even grab my keys or shoes. I sprinted down the hallway and pounded on my neighbor's door until they opened it. I must have looked insane, standing there in my sweatpants, pale and shaking, begging them to let me in. Thankfully, they did. We called the police together, but by the time they searched my apartment, no one was there. Nothing was stolen, no signs of forced entry, but the back balcony door was cracked open. I stayed with a friend for a few nights after that, but when I finally went back to my apartment, the calls started again. Always from blocked numbers. Always with that same whisper. To this day, I don't know if it was Alyssa or someone else entirely. The police couldn't do anything since the calls were blocked, and eventually, they just stopped. But every time my phone rings at night, I feel that same pit in my stomach. And I can't help but wonder if one day I'll hear that whisper again. Weddings are supposed to feel safe. Surrounded by friends, family, and people you trust. That's what I kept telling myself as I got ready for my best friend's wedding last year. At the time, I had just gotten out of a relationship that ended badly. My ex, who I'll call Derek, wasn't violent, but he was obsessive. He hated that I was the one who ended things, and he made it clear he didn't want to let go. The texts, the calls, the constant accidental run-ins all lasted for weeks. I finally blocked him everywhere, and after about a month, the silence made me think maybe he'd finally moved on. By the time my friend's wedding rolled around, Derek wasn't on my mind anymore. I was excited. I spent the whole ceremony sitting with old friends, laughing, catching up, and feeling normal again. For the first time in months, I felt like my life had finally shifted forward. The ceremony ended beautifully. And when the reception started, the venue lit up with music, drinks, and food. It was packed with guests, but everything felt warm and celebratory. I grabbed a drink, found my table, and that's when I noticed something that made me pause. Across the room, standing near the bar, was a waiter. He wasn't serving drinks, though. He wasn't moving around like the others. He was just standing there, holding an empty tray, staring directly at me. It took me a few seconds to process, but once my eyes adjusted, my stomach dropped. It was Derek. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just staring at me with this hollow look, like he was waiting for me to notice. At first, I thought maybe my brain was playing tricks on me. The lighting was dim, and I'd had half a glass of champagne. But when he started slowly walking closer through the crowd, weaving between people with that same dead-eyed expression, I knew it wasn't my imagination. My immediate thought was, how did he get in here? This was a private wedding at a rented venue. You couldn't just wander in, which meant he must have intentionally posed as staff to get inside. I tried to play it off, telling myself maybe he was just here to work. But that didn't make sense. None of the other waiters looked anything like him, and they were all wearing matching uniforms. His outfit was slightly different. The shirt wasn't tucked in, and the vest looked wrinkled. It was like he put it together last minute just to blend in. I didn't want to make a scene, so I excused myself from the table and went to find the bride's brother, who I knew was helping organize. I pulled him aside and quietly told him that my ex, who wasn't invited, had somehow gotten in and was pretending to be staff. He took it seriously right away. He asked me to point him out, but when we went back into the main room, Derek was gone. For the next 20 minutes, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept scanning the crowd, looking for that face. Every time a waiter walked by, I had to double-check. My appetite was gone. My nerves were shot. Then, while standing near the dance floor, I felt a hand brush against mine. I whipped around, and there he was. He leaned in close enough for only me to hear and whispered, "You look beautiful tonight." I froze. My friend's father was giving a toast just a few feet away, and everyone's eyes were on him. Nobody saw Derek slip past me and walk toward the exit. I immediately grabbed the bride's brother again, and this time, he got 2 of the actual staff members to check outside. But again, Derek had vanished. The rest of the night, I couldn't shake the feeling he was still there. I kept catching glimpses, a shadow near the bathrooms, a figure slipping through the crowd. But every time I tried to focus, he was gone. When the reception finally ended, I left with a group instead of walking to my car alone. I checked the lot carefully before leaving. Nothing. But when I got home later that night, I noticed something that made me realize it wasn't just paranoia. Sitting on my front porch, neatly placed against the door, was a folded black waiter's vest. No note, no words, just the vest. I didn't sleep that night, and to this day, I still don't know how long he had been watching me before I finally saw him in the crowd. Some exes leave memories, others never really leave at all. If these stories kept you awake tonight, subscribe for more true horror delivered straight to your door. Which story scared you the most? Comment below, and remember, some things are closer than you think.